Hello and welcome to Digital Photo Academy. This is Asif Raza. This video is a follow-up to the previous video where we had started discussing the various tools on the toolbar. And the last video we had looked at the first few tools up to the selection tools where we looked at the magic wand, quick selection, and the object selection tool. So following that, the next tool that we're going to be looking at is the crop tool. Now, when you choose the crop tool, you will notice that on the window there's a frame around the image, and basically what it's doing is it's telling me that I can grab it from different corners and adjust it to the crop that I'm looking for. Because when we choose the crop tool, please pay attention to the options bar at the top. There's a bunch of options. So the very first option is referring to ratios. So what ratios are is the relative width and height that you wish to crop the image to. So there are a whole bunch of presets in here. So if I left it to the original ratio, then I could grab it from one corner, and even if I tried to move the cursor around, it doesn't really matter. It will retain the relative proportions of the width and the height. Next up is a square. So in the same way that the original maintained its ratio, now we have a square which is 1:1. So the image is now a square, and we can adjust it, we can reduce it, or whatever we wish to do it. So in the same manner that we can do a square, there's a whole bunch of presets available over here. And you also have the ability of creating a new preset for yourself, or you could say, hey, I wish to define what kind of a crop I want. So if I went to the width and height plus resolution, I could say I want my width at 10 inches, the height at 6 inches, and the resolution at 300 pixels per inch, or centimeters, I'm keeping it to inches. Or I could change my resolution if I was posting it on a web environment. I could choose pixels over here as opposed to inches and modify the resolution from 300 to whatever that I may want. That's one way of controlling it. And if you like what this is a crop that you consistently use or on a regular basis, there's nothing stopping you from saying, hey, I want to create a new crop preset. And when you click on that, a new dialog box opens up and you can say exactly what you want, and this will then become a preset. So if I hit OK, if I go to the drop down, you will notice that there should be a new preset which is 10 by 6 inches and at 300 pixels per inch. So that's one way of approaching this. So we understand this option. Then we have a straighten option. So what this is about, in case you haven't straightened your image at the raw stage, or you wish to modify the angle or whatever it may be, provided you have a horizontal in your image, you can choose the straighten option here, click on that, and you'll notice the cursor takes on that shape. Simply click and drag along, and I'm not really cropping anything in here as yet. And if I took the straighten tool and I straightened it, or let's say I intentionally angle it, let's see what happens. So notice it has, based on the way I had placed that, it has modified itself. So in my case, if I wanted to verify that I am straight, I notice there's a nice clean horizontal line. I'll simply drag it along as straight as possible, and that's about it. Next to the straighten option, you have an overlay option. Now, overlays are interesting and important because notice currently there's an overlay where my image is divided into 3 equal portions, left to right and top to bottom, which is basically following the rule of thirds. And that's exactly what it says over here. If you modify it to the grid option, then it'll show you a grid. And similarly, there are different options that you can go to. Now, you also have the choice of switching off the overlay if that's something that bothers you. So you can simply check on the option which says never show overlay, so the overlay will never be shown. Okay, I kind of prefer to have the overlay always available to me. Beyond that, you have a shortcut which is very useful because going back in here every single time, it's not a whole lot of fun. So cycle overlay. So it's an O. So if I said, okay, I am currently in the grid overlay, and if I simply go and hit the O on the keyboard, I have changed it. And then O again, and it modifies itself. And then O again, and it changes itself again. And then O, and so on and so forth. Now, if I wanted to change the orientation of the overlay, for example, this is the golden curve, and currently the line is starting from the bottom left and going up to the top left. So all I have to do is press Shift and O, and the orientation of that will change. So I did Shift and O, and notice it's flipped over and modified itself, and you can continue cycling through until you find the choice that you may be seeking. So it's all completely adaptable and changeable as you may wish to. Then there is this option of delete cropped pixels. So if you have it checked, what will happen is that when you do create a crop, it'll lose all the pixels that are out there. But if you don't check it, then Photoshop will retain that information as cropped information, and you will never really be deleting that pixel space. The content aware is pretty cool. For example, if I say, hey, I wish I had framed the image differently and I had a little more space to the right and the left, or whatever it may be. So if I extend this from the right hand side further out, so right now it's proportional, okay? So it's set to the original ratio, a 4:5, for example. So now I have a 4:5, relatively speaking, and there are spaces on the left and right. So what happens when I do click on the apply, which is the check mark at the top? Let's see. So this may take a few moments for it to actually apply itself. So don't panic if things don't happen immediately, because what Photoshop is trying to do is not only crop it down to a 4" by 5", but it's also filled in a smart, intelligent way by looking at the neighboring information and extending that information. And if you hadn't seen this happen, you would not have known whether this is the way it was shot or this is the way I have modified it. So I'm going to undo that for a minute. So there's a whole load of options when it comes to the crop tool. Never ignore, this is a very powerful tool. Then if you keep this tool depressed, you have the perspective crop tool. This is, I'm not sure how frequently would one use this, but I mean, it's an option that's available. So you first draw, let's say I'm going to draw it something like this, okay? And then I want to modify the behavior. So if I kind of created this sort of a angularity to the image, pay attention to the horizontals and see what happens when we actually apply it, okay? There we go. So it has kind of squished and done all kinds of weird things, which is not the most pleasant. Personally speaking, I would tend not to use the perspective crop tool as often because I can modify the behavior and create dimensionality in an image without going there. We're not going to talk about the slice tool, either the slice select or the slice tool, because these are mostly used to create smaller pieces of an image to make it efficient for a web environment. If you were a web developer, then yes, it is extremely valid and very useful. Next is the frame tool. Frame tool again doesn't really relate to photography directly. It's more a design thing. Basically what it does is it creates a little frame in the image and you can place an object within that frame. That's what the behavior is of the frame tool. But the next tool is an important one, which is the eyedropper tool. And then within the eyedropper tool, there's a whole bunch of other things that are here. Some of these really don't relate to photography directly, but the two that are important that we should be aware of, one is the eyedropper tool and the other is the color sampling tool. So if we choose the eyedropper tool, What it does is it allows us to sample a color or any color within the image. And if you pay attention to the colors in the toolbar, it's the foreground color that will change itself. And once again, pay attention to the options at the top. So first you have to choose an average size. So the smaller the size, if it's a point, it's literally picking up information from a single pixel, or a 3 by 3 average and up to 101 by 101. Then the next option here is, if you go through the drop down where it says current layer, current and below, all layers, no adjustment, current and below, no adjustment. So if you have a multi-layer file and you have done adjustments and you want to really get an idea of what the color is after all the layers and the adjustments that you have made, then perhaps all layers. And if you wish to ignore the adjustments, then you simply choose all layers, no adjustment, or current and below, no adjustment. It's up to you. So currently I am to current layer only because I really don't have any layers in here. It's a single locked background layer. And the show sampling ring is active because it kind of helps me understand where I'm taking the sample from. So pay attention to this red color over here. So if I click, notice it shows me the sampling ring and it shows what the background color was and what the current color is. And once I let go of it, it brings up the blue in the foreground. And if I went to the red, now it's showing me what the previous color was, and now I am picking on the red. So now I have got the red. So this allows me to actually sample a color for creating whatever added effects that I may want using that particular color, or filling in colors, or whatever I may wish to, which is something we'll explore later on. And then is the color sampler tool. I personally like using this tool because it's a wonderful, wonderful tool. And what this does is it again has the same options of point sample, 3 by 3, or anything up to 101 by 101. So let me demonstrate what happens. If I took a point sample and I come to this region and I click somewhere here, so it leaves a little marker, and which is number 1. And immediately another dialog box opens up which refers to the info. So if you notice, it has created a number 1 sample here, and it tells me exactly what the RGB values are at that point. Now, if we remember this, or even if we don't remember this, and we take a 51 by 51 average, and right next to it we place the sample. Notice the sample is slightly different. Very, very small change because it's a very similar color, but 15 by 50, 51 by 51 means it's a 51 pixel by 51 pixel square space that it is looking at. So you can place multiple bits of markers to get information with regards to highlights, shadows, or colors, whatever it may be. So for example, if I place it on the white, it tells me exactly what my white values are. And now I can make adjustments based on the fact that this is what it is, so I don't blow up the highlight, and I'm not really dependent on how my monitor displays the image. And if once you're done, these are non-printing characters, you can leave it alone, but if it visually bothers you, you simply go to the clear all and click on clear all. Hopefully these two tools made sense, and next we will discuss in another video our retouching, spot healing, healing brush, patch tool, content aware move tool, and the red eye tool. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much, and look after yourself.